Good evening, blog viewers. We'll cycle back to the virtue of humility today. And since we're talking about humility, obviously we have to talk about pride, because pride is usually sort of the corresponding vice to humility. Pride is something that often prevents us from having a humble disposition on the world and ourselves, and so is the corresponding vice. And so if humility is a virtue, we have to figure out to what extent pride is a vice and is preventing the attainment of that virtue in the best way that is possible. Now, pride is an interesting notion. The unwritten actually doesn't do pride. Unwritten reality doesn't do pride, though it is entirely perfect and errorless. It never exhibits any sort of pride. It's not conscious, so it can't have those sorts of feelings. So human pride is obviously what we're going to talk about today, and obviously, so some of the questions that immediately come up is, with respect to human pride, is it an error? And in what sense is it an error? Does it prevent the attainment of human good? Are only certain types of pride sort of an error? And is there a bright line we can draw between good pride that is not an error and does not cause problems, and bad pride that obviously does cause problems? First, I want to suggest, with respect to these questions, that there is actually somewhat of a bright line here. What sorts of things, if we think about it, is it really silly to be very proud about? And I think that is basically anything that you haven't really earned through your own efforts. If you inherited a bunch of money, if you have good looks that you basically get from your genes, if you have good athletic ability that you basically get from your genes, clothes and other things that you buy that you don't really share any sort of role in designing, you just purchase it somewhere. It's kind of silly to be very proud about those things. It's not, you didn't do any of that stuff. You know, you have sort of these genes within you that sort of you were blessed with having certain genes of that sort that made it much easier for you to do certain things. Or you inherited a bunch of money. Again, those are not things that it doesn't make sense to be very proud about. So anything that you really haven't earned through your efforts, I would suggest would be a good place to start thinking about this issue with respect to bad pride. So that would mean, conversely, that anything that you do earn through your efforts, anything you achieve through your efforts, you have a good right to be proud about. You should be proud about. You work hard to make a certain amount of money. You have you don't have natural athletic ability sort of genetically, but you get into fantastic shape that you can, as fantastic of a shape as you can, given what you have. You change your lifestyle and start living in a very health conscious manner, and you sort of do that through your efforts laboriously. You create something, some invention you make, some creative work you do that is useful to yourself and others. For example, you form a business, you write a book, you create a song, all these things. I think there's a right, you have a right to be proud about these things that have sort of been created through your efforts, that have been brought into the world through your efforts, through your mind or through other things that you've done, choices you've made. But is that the end of the story? And I don't think it is. I think even with respect to things that you have a right to be proud about, things like writing the book or creating a song or forming a business, getting into great shape, making money through your honest, diligent efforts, changing your lifestyle, all those things, maybe giving up alcohol or certain addictions. You have a right to be proud about that stuff, but I think there has to be sort of a finite time and a right manner to be proud. It's not the end of the story to say, you achieve something through your own efforts and you have a right to be proud to it. I think there has to be some limit to it. First, on finite time, I think there has to be sort of a set period where you say, it doesn't have to be exactly, calendared, but I think there has to be some limit to it. So maybe after writing the book, you celebrate with a party where you obviously, display pride of your achievement of writing this book. And, people know that. People can see that you're proud of your achievement. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Same thing when you, for example, let's say create a song, or you form a business and it's successful. Again, you can have some limited pride in that sense for a finite period. But I would argue that this is not the sort of thing that you should carry around for years. You shouldn't constantly remind people that you wrote that book, or you created that successful business, or you went to a certain Ivy League school or whatever. So whenever you do have something that you're proud about, that you achieve through your efforts, I don't think you should try to perpetuate that pride on that basis for years. Next, I would say, in terms of the right manner to be proud, this is a point I think David Hume that we are in this post going to be posting the the quotations. I won't be reading them, but Hume makes this point very emphatically, and that is that what's often so bad about pride, and what's often so distorting about it, is it gets linked. It often activates the mind's tendency to exaggerate certain things, to do nothing, as we've sort of discussed on the blog. We lose our sense of reality often with respect to things that we perhaps initially had a very good right to be proud about, but we sort of exaggerate and overstate and carry it way beyond sort of the what was actually achieved. So, for example, we write a good book or a good song, it gets good reviews, people like the song, some people like it, or we live in a decent neighborhood that objectively has some decent characteristics. Maybe there's a low crime rate, maybe it has a decent climate, it has well manicured gardens or whatever, or we live in a city that has a great climate, sunny most of the year. We come up with a good idea of how to do things differently, maybe with respect to politics or a business or an organization. We come up with a new way of doing things that's actually an improvement. So all those things are good, and they're all things that we could perhaps feel a sense of pride over. But then we exaggerate it, and that's the problem. We exaggerate it little by little, so that by the end we've sort of lost our perspective on whatever that thing was. So now, instead of writing just a good book, or instead of thinking we've just written a decent book that's gotten a few decent reviews and a few people like it, or same with the song, we exaggerate, and so little by little it becomes the book we wrote becomes the best book on the topic, or we've written now the best song, we live now in the best neighborhood, our city has the best climate of anywhere, our idea is the best way of doing things now, not just an improvement, but the best way of doing things. And so all of this we continue to exaggerate whatever we had a legitimate right to be proud about in the beginning. And over many years, if that kind of activity is engaged in, we become, I would say, totally blind to the fact that we are continuing to exaggerate things in this way. And that is an error, and it's basically, again, like with many of the other errors we've discussed, it's basically an error of the mind doing nothing. It's an error of the mind creating facts or beliefs, creating them literally out of thin air, out of nothing. And other people will see that. They'll see that as an error because they are more objective about whatever you created or whatever thing you achieved. They don't have that sort of tendency to exaggerate. They don't have the motivation to do it because they don't have the same need for pride with respect to that achievement. And so they'll see it for what it is. They'll see, maybe they won't use the word nothing or whatever, but they'll think you're being foolish for really thinking you've done something so great when you really haven't. And that'll create problems, I think, for your relationships with people and your ability to interact with them. And so I think that is an issue. So what's the real problem with pride then? Why is it such a problem, and why would going in the opposite direction and cultivating humility as opposed to pride, why would that be so much better? Why would that be a corresponding virtue that would actually cause you to live better within reality, within life, not just for the sake of claiming you have a virtue, but really would improve your life? And so I think here the real problem with pride is very clearly it causes you to be closed and unable to have a broader range of experiences. If you keep wanting to frame conversations in a way toward those things that you are very proud about with others, keep wanting to push the conversation in those directions. Maybe it's even subconscious, but if you keep doing that, you lose out or you miss out on a whole different set of conversations. Conversation could have gone a different way, but you keep framing it and you keep moving it into those areas, or you allow it, even if the other person is doing it, you allow it to consistently come back to those few things that you're very proud about. And I think you lose out on a broader range of conversations. Or in another way, you get closed in that you keep putting more and more of your finite time and resources in a small set of activities that is causing you to feel pride. And so you continue to sort of up the ante on that activity, continue to put more time, continue to put more energy, continue to put more your emotional being into it. And again, every decision like that means you're not doing something else. So I think, for example, if you're let's say you're getting a lot of pride out of the fact that you are beautiful, you would spend more of your money on clothes, and more of your time reading beauty magazines, and you would spend a lot more time in the gym. And because you would continue to want to feel pride as to your appearance and your beauty, and you continue to sort of up the ante on that, continue to spend more time, money, and mental attention on it, and because of that, and you continue to probably have that high sense of pride from looking objectively or subjectively to others beautiful, but you miss out again on a whole different range of experiences, things you could have done with your money otherwise, things you could have done with your time otherwise, and then spending all the time in the gym, and different experiences you could have had, different bases. You could be also building up different bases and achievements to be proud about, rather than the one or two that you have right now. So again, for that reason, I would say that pride is a problem, or most forms of pride is a problem, and causes a problem with respect to attaining human good. And I don't think that's a good trait, to sort of end the post here. I don't think that's a good trait. Sort of losing out on experiences within the world of being, within reality, new and different experiences, for the sake of keeping sort of an elevated sense of pride going in your mind. I don't think that's a good trait. Pride is largely, I would argue, made in the mind. It's a pure form. Pride doesn't exist really within nature. It doesn't exist within the unwritten reality of the universe. It's really just a mind-made creation. And if it's causing you to lose out on real experiences, or different experiences, in exchange for something that doesn't really reside within the world of being, I think that's usually a bad trade. And so outside of a sort of a very small, temporally finite, and sort of limited sense of pride that comes from achievements, I think we discussed that earlier in the post, sort of a limited, temporally finite sense of being proud about certain things that you've immediately accomplished, that through your efforts, something that was through your efforts. I think pride is largely something that needs to be avoided if someone is serious about attaining human good. So with that, we'll end this post. And again, this is just my comments, but though I'll post the the relevant selections from Hume's treatise. So if everyone should sort of read those as well and consider them part of the post. So we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.